So this is a video no one asked for or even needed, but it's something that always really bugged me about the Harry Potter films for whatever reason. And I didn't really see too much else on the topic, so I figured, eh. Okay, so long story short, I was getting to know someone recently, and turns out we both like the Harry Potter films, which led to the natural discussion about which one is the best, and of course it's Chamber of Secrets because Tom Riddle is awesome. But it also made me realize I actually haven't seen most of the films in a couple of years now, so I've been rewatching them, and it struck me once again, as it always does when I rewatch the series, about how little is explained about Apparition. Like, it irritates me how the films just never explain it. You know, in the novels, Apparition is either alluded to or mentioned by name in every book, which builds to a gradual understanding of the ability and how it works, so when it becomes an actual mechanic in the final two books, it makes sense. But in the films, it's basically like, oh, we're not even really going to touch on that until movie 6, and even then it's mentioned all of twice, and then in the final films everyone can just do it. No explanation, no nothing, and, oh, here it is, moving on. And like I said, it just really irritates me. I mean, on one hand, I understand that filmmakers are under more constraints and have to worry about things that books don't, like aesthetics, continuity between shots, running time, etc. So I know they can't deep dive into everything. But on the other hand, one of the most important aspects of filmmaking is making sure your audience will understand what's going on. That doesn't mean you have to hold their hand and explain every little thing, but you also can't assume that the entire audience has read the books/media/content your movies are adapted from, and will therefore understand subtle references or how the world you're showing them is supposed to work. You have to explain it. That's the reason the original Game of Thrones pilot had to be reshot. It's the reason that Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, the movie, despite being a direct sequel of Final Fantasy VII, the game, goes out of its way to explain the key points of the original plot of the game, just so that people watching who didn't play the game can understand what's going on in the film. It's the reason why the first few films in the Harry Potter series made sure to explain every new plot element or term. Quidditch, Muggles, the ceiling in the Great Hall, the different spells being performed, etc. It's common sense, you know? Make sure people watching understand what's going on. And I could even see why the filmmakers might not have thought much of mentioning it if it was a kind of one-off thing and they didn't really think it was going to come into play later. But by the time the Goblet of Fire film was being released, 5 of the original 7 books had already been published, with the 6th coming out that same year. So they definitely knew Apparition wasn't going to be a one and done kind of deal. It would have made sense to at least mention it somewhere, but they didn't bother until they absolutely had to. And even then it was vague and not really explained, and to me that's just an oversight on the filmmakers' parts. Bottom line is, if you haven't read the books, then you should still be able to understand everything that's going on. And I don't know about anyone else, but if I hadn't read the books, in movie 6 it would have been like, the heck is Apparition? My sister said the filmmakers probably thought it was self-explanatory, given that Harry and Dumbledore disappear and then reappear and refer to that as Apparition. But I don't know, it just seems like a lazy way to introduce an ability that's going to play such a big role in the final 2 films. And I'll explain why. Let's look at Apparition in the books as compared to the films. So, the very first time Apparition is alluded to in the books is on page 16 of the very first book, Sorcerer's Stone, where Dumbledore, quote, turned on his heel and with a swish of his cloak, he was gone. The next hint is just a little further into the book on page 30, where Harry notes that the strange people he sometimes saw, quote, seemed to vanish the second Harry tried to get a closer look, which obviously is pretty vague. I mean, to be fair, it was the first book. I don't know if J.K. Rowling, is that how you say it? I always used to say Rowling, but I saw somewhere it was Rowling, so forgive me if I'm wrong. J.K. Rowling might not have known that she was going to do the rest of the series, or that it was going to be as big as it was, so maybe she didn't have like all the rules in place, so maybe it didn't have a name or anything at that time, but at the very least it was introduced in its way. And then in book 2, Chamber of Secrets, Apparition is once again alluded to on page 19 when, quote, with a crack like a whip, Dobby vanished, which is also our first look at what the sound of apparition is like, a crack like a whip. And then on page 69, Apparition is referred to by name for the very first time, with Ron saying that his mom and dad won't need the car to get home because they, quote, know how to apparate, you know, vanish and reappear at home. They only bother with flu powder in the car because we're all underage and not allowed to apparate yet, which not only tells us about apparition, but also how it works and lets us know that you're not allowed to do it until a certain point in your education, which definitely matters later. So in the next book, Prisoner of Azkaban, Apparition is again mentioned by name on page 163 when everyone is theorizing how Sirius Black might be getting in the castle, with a Ravenclaw saying, quote, maybe he knows how to apparate, just appear out of thin air, you know? To which Hermione responds, quote, honestly, am I the only person who's ever bothered to read Hogwarts a history? Because the castle's protected by more than walls, you know. There are all sorts of enchantments on it to stop people entering by stealth. You can't just apparate in here. Which, I just realized, I don't know if I should be saying quote and then unquote, but we're just gonna roll with it. So anyway, that's yet another explanation that will come into play later. The fact that you cannot apparate into Hogwarts. Oh, this is editing me from the future. I absolutely blanked on the part on page 419 where Snape is having a meltdown after Sirius gets away. And Fudge tells him he must have disapparated Severus. We should have left somebody in the room with him. When this gets out, and Snape cuts him off, going, he didn't disapparate. You can't apparate or disapparate inside this castle. This has something to do with Potter. So yeah, just another mention of apparition, and if it wasn't made clear enough before that you can't apparate or disapparate inside Hogwarts, Snape definitely, made sure everybody knows. Anyway, just wanted to add that part since I randomly remembered it while I was editing the part on book 3. I was like, oh man, I gotta get that in there. So, back on track. So, in book 4, Goblet of Fire, on page 710, Snape mentions apparition when trying to convince Fudge that Voldemort is indeed back. Kinda like that pimple you thought was finally gone, but lo and behold, there it is. Saying, quote, when he touched the mark of any Death Eater, we were to disapparate and apparate instantly at his side. So, definitely not adding anything new, but reminding you that apparition is a thing. In the next book, book 5, Order of the Phoenix, it's also mentioned a couple of times. On page 7, where Harry is sure he heard the telltale crack of someone disapparating. On page 68, when Fred and George are happily abusing their ability to apparate by going short distances. And then on page 817, when a ministry worker tells Fudge that he saw Voldemort grab a woman and disapparate. Which I don't even understand how, since if you can't apparate into Hogwarts, a school, you really shouldn't be able to apparate into wizarding government. But whatever, not the point of this video. The point is, by book 6, the ability of apparition is well established. So it makes sense and fits perfectly that they begin to learn the ability for themselves, and all of the things you've already learned come into play. Like not being able to apparate in Hogwarts, the you shall not pass spell has been temporarily lifted so they can all practice. The nasty side effect flinching, the separation of random body parts when you're not determined enough, which sounds super painful, is also explained, because it also plays a role in the next book. And by the end of book 6, all 3 of them have apparated for the first time, with Hermione passing her test perfectly, Ron successfully apparating but just failing his test, and Harry managing to apparate himself and Dumbledore back to the castle after the events at the cave. So everything for the next book has been set up perfectly. So when you see them apparating, talking about how it works and something, none of it comes as a real surprise because you already know all this. It's just a piece of information you have. which is how it's supposed to go. Oh, and keep in mind, all these mentions of Apparition are just ones I remembered off the top of my head. I didn't reread the books at all. I just remembered them. I'm sure there are even more references to Apparition that I'm just not remembering, which just goes to show just how much Apparition is established in the books. Whereas in the movies, it's like the complete opposite. Don't get me wrong, like I said before, I know that the filmmakers did not have the freedom the books did to explain all this, but we just went through the way Apparition is mentioned and built up in the books, and you're not left scratching your head wondering what Apparition is or how it works. You just know. Meanwhile, in the movies, okay, as far as I can tell, these are the only references or mentions of Apparition in the first 7 films. Harry Potter 1, Sorcerer's Stone. Harry and Hagrid are at the station. Harry looks down at his ticket and is confused why it says platform 9 3/4. Asks Hagrid about it, but when he looks up, Hagrid is gone. Which is a whole other problem I have, given that Hagrid was expelled in his 3rd year and shouldn't know how to apparate or do nonverbal spells. But that's a whole different rant. So moving on. Point is, that is the only even allusion to Apparition in the first film. The second movie, Harry Potter Chamber of Secrets. Again, the only even reference to it is when Dobby snaps his fingers and disappears. That's it. They don't even try slipping it in during the discussion about the car like the books did. All that said is,
maybe we should just go and wait by the car. The car?
And then you're moving on. Like we are. Because there is no reference in movie 3 or movie 4. And then, even in Order 5, the only reference is the members of the Order and then the Death Eaters apparating in and out in clouds of smoke? Like, I don't even get that. It's something you never saw before and you don't see again, so I assume it's something flashy they added for the movie, but it really just doesn't make sense. But point is, there's that, and then Voldemort piecing out in front of Cornelius and company in the Ministry, proving that he is indeed back. Other than that, once again, Apparition is just very vaguely alluded to. And that's it. Those are the only references to Apparition in the entire film series until Harry Potter 6, Half-Blood Prince, when it's finally mentioned by name, but only twice. In the beginning, where Dumbledore takes Harry with him to find Slughorn, and Harry says,
I just apparated, didn't I?
Indeed.
And then towards the end of the film, where Dumbledore is taking Harry with him again, prompting Harry to ask,
So I thought you couldn't apparate within Hogwarts?
Well, being me has its privileges.
What? What does that even mean? Like you're above the same enchantments everyone else is? In the books, at least, it shows Dumbledore breaking his own enchantments to get inside faster, but in the movies? Nah, we'll just give you this vague explanation as to why Dumbledore can apparate in and out, but the Death Eaters have to play hide and seek to get in. No biggie. Ugh. And then to make matters worse, the 7th film, they can all just apparate now. No explanation, no build-up. Just, we have learned the apparition ability off screen and we are now moving on, which there is just so much wrong with. I mean, okay, so at the end of film 6, none of them could apparate, and the Hogwarts year ends in early June. Harry's birthday is at the end of July, which is when they apparate out of the attack at the wedding. So in the span of a month and a half, we went from no knowledge, no theory, no practice at apparition to where they can all do it just fine. Hermione apparates them out of the wedding. Harry sometimes does it too. And Ron also apparates out when he has his little hissy fit. So yeah, nice job, films. Well done. And the saddest part about it is there was a perfect way to slip it in movie 3. Like, it doesn't have to be a plot point or anything. Just mention it. They could have taken a page out of the book, literally, and had a conversation amongst the students trying to figure out how Black was getting in and out of the castle where apparition is mentioned and why that wouldn't work. Or they could have used this scene where the teachers are walking around while the students sleep giving an update on castle security, and instead of saying this,
remarkable feat, don't you think? To enter Hogwarts Castle on one's own, completely undetected.
Quite remarkable, yeah.
Any theories on how he might have managed it?
Many, each as unlikely as the next.
You may recall, prior to the start of term, I did express concerns about your appointment of Professor...
Not a single professor inside this castle would help Sirius Black to enter.
Snape could have said, quote, "Well, he can't operate into Hogwarts. No one can. In fact, no one can figure out how he's getting in. Professor Dumbledore, you'll remember at the beginning of the year." I'm kidding, I can't do his voice at all. But you get what I mean. Like, just a simple switch up in dialogue, and there you have it. Apparition is established, and it's also established that you can't use it to get in and out of Hogwarts. And you did it in, what, 20 seconds? I know runtime is an issue, but if movie 3 could waste time on this...
Let them swim in the deepest ocean, or glide over the highest cloud.
Or this... Or this...
What is that? Do not give him one again.
Then they absolutely could have found a spot in the runtime to mention Apparition. And as you may have been able to tell, I really don't like movie 3. I have so many problems with it. I swear it's one of my least favorite Harry Potter films. Oh, I could make a whole video explaining why. I just... anyway. Hi, it's me from the future. I realized I completely screwed up the section on movie 7, so I think it's a little weird when they come to move Harry from the Dursleys to a safe house. Mad-Eye Moody says that they're going to use means of transport the Trace can't detect, and it's just a little odd to me considering I don't think that was established enough in the film series to say that. And for that matter, doesn't that kind of contradict Chamber of Secrets, where somehow the Ministry was able to pick up on Dobby's levitation spell, but somehow not him apparating out of there? I mean, if they could pick up on one aspect of his magic, why not the other? And if they couldn't pick up on the apparition, doesn't that mean you can apparate without detection? Like, I don't get it. See, inconsistency in rules. It's just... You see what I mean? I know I'm nitpicking, but come on. I mean, I know they needed an explanation as to why they weren't going to use that stuff, but I think it's just kind of an example of what I was talking about and how it just isn't established, it isn't built up, you're just expected to believe this, which is especially weird considering in the previous film, Dumbledore was apparating Harry all over creation, so it's like, the Death Eaters were around and very active at that point, so like, why was that safe and this isn't? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And to be fair, that's a flaw the book has too. Although, at least in the book, they kind of make it sound like the Ministry is working overtime to kiss Dumbledore's wand due to spending a year insisting that he's a crazy person for saying that Voldemort's back, and oh, look, he was right. So, I have a problem with that, and it's just one of those things that could have been easily fixed had they just set it up. But no. Anyway, what I'm saying is, you look at the books and you see how well built up it is, and then you look at the movies and it's like, kinda, not mentioned at all, kinda, oh, they mentioned it by name, but still kinda, oh hey, it's movie 7 and everyone can just do it. It's like, that's not very well thought out to me. I think that's an oversight on the filmmaker's part, especially when you consider at least the last 3 films were written and directed by the same people, and by that I mean the same screenwriter did the last 3 films and the same director did the last 3 films, not that the same guy did both jobs. But yeah, anyway, that's just my really long way of saying that I wish Apparition had been explained more in the films, or it's not explained at all really, it's just mentioned and then used. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Harry Potter, I really love the book series, and I actually really like the film series too. I just feel the movies sometimes lack the same heart the books did, if that makes sense. But in any case, that's pretty much all I had to say. Let me know if you'd like to see more, if you'd like to hear why I can't stand movie 3 for the most part, or if there's anything that drives you crazy about the films that you wish they had mentioned or taken out. Thank you for watching if you did, and I hope you have a great day.